Imagine this situation. It's 3 in the morning. You're in your bed and without knowing why, you wake up. There's no noise, you haven't had a nightmare, and nothing special has happened. You simply open your eyes, everything around you. It's silent, but there's something there that doesn't fit. A strange feeling that's hard to explain. You get up, slowly walk down the long hallway and reach the closed kitchen door, and when you're standing directly in front of it, you see it, a startling sight. A very thin, almost imperceptible, grey and barely visible thread of smoke is slowly but steadily coming out from underneath, emerging from its hidden source. But it keeps coming out from under the door. And now, pay attention to something, because there's something important here. The most dangerous thing about smoke isn't the smoke itself nor the smell. The most truly dangerous thing is that almost always, the smoke often appears just before the destructive fire itself. So you proceed carefully. You open the door, turn on the light, and at least immediately, you see that there are no flames and no explosions, there's only smoke. You open a window and air the place out a bit, wait a few minutes, and as soon as you see things are clearing up, you close it. You calm down, and deep down you think, well, at this hour, 3 in the morning, I don't have anyone who can come help me, and from what I can see, it's not that big of a deal either. So you simply close the door, then you go back to your comfortable bed and you quickly fall fast asleep. But while you are peacefully sleeping, whatever mysterious element caused the smoke is still very much there, and it is continuously heating up the electrical wires, potentially leading to a much more serious situation. It's silently damaging the structure of your house. This example brings me to what I want for you to understand today. The greatest enemy of your longevity usually doesn't arrive with pain or with fever or with sirens. It comes silently, little by little. Science officially calls it inflammation, but I personally prefer that you simply and clearly call it the insidious silent fire burning within. In the last 2 comprehensive videos, we've been carefully peeling back the intricate layers. In the very first one, we clearly saw the initial spark, that is to say, the significant damage to the cellular DNA, the progressive shortening of the protective telomeres, and with all of that, the fundamental start of the entire problem. In the second video, we saw the machinery, that is, the kitchen losing its burners, the energy that no longer burns properly, and the cells that remain when, in fact, they should be leaving. The zombie cells. Today, we're truly taking it a significant step further. We're going to completely stop talking about individual separate parts, and instead, we will start discussing the entire comprehensive system as a whole. Your body is like a house full of tiny sensors. You have sensors for damage, for energy, for danger. And in a healthy house, the system works more or less like this. If something happens, boom, the alarm goes off. If it's a fire, the firefighters come, the fire is put out, and everything more or less returns to normal in a very short time. The problem, modern related to our longevity, however, is very different. It works differently. In numerous people, the alarm goes off in their minds, yet the actual fire simply doesn't get effectively put out. And therefore, neither does the alarm. And this isn't because there was a big fire, but rather because it never actually happens. That moment when you can finally say, everything is fine. In other words, the whole fire is out, we've flooded it with water, and the fire is over. Here, since that doesn't happen, what happens when the alarm doesn't turn off? It's very simple. The firefighters don't leave. Instead of coming and going every time we call them, they stay. And pay attention to this because it's important. The firefighters aren't bad. In fact, they're just doing their job. The problem these firefighters cause is wear and tear, because if you have to live with firefighters inside your house all day, even if they don't mean to, they're eventually going to end up damaging your home. Their boots scuff the walls, their tools scratch the floor, and their constant presence takes its toll. In the end, all of that ends up damaging what they were trying to protect. Well, what I'm telling you here is what's commonly known as low-grade chronic inflammation, and it's not a disease in itself, it's simply a physiological state, but it is a state of constant ongoing emergency, requiring immediate attention and response from the body's systems. A small alarm, quiet, but it's on all day, every week, every month. And that causes problems. Now, I'd like you to think of it as a kind of very simple chain of events, one that happens without any big leaps. And now you'll understand, as the years go by, especially if you move less, you start to lose muscle. When you lose muscle, you lose those little burners I mentioned, and if you lose burners, what else happens? Less energy. You eat. Pretty much the same, but however, your body no longer uses that food in the same way. In other words, you start to have excess fuel in your body, and here comes a concept you really need to understand. The body, your body, doesn't know how to handle excess very well. Your body knows how to burn or defend itself, but when there's extra energy, what it does is bother, irritate. And when the body gets irritated, it activates all its defenses. At first, those defenses are undoubtedly good. It's an acute inflammation that cleans, repairs, and protects. The problem arises when the excess becomes a daily thing, day after day, year after year. Then the inflammation doesn't go away. It stays active every day, and when it lingers, the silent fire appears. This is neither a coincidence, nor bad luck, nor accumulation. No. But before we get into that, let's go up one more level, because this fire doesn't live in a single concentrated spot. It lives in the communication between the body's tissues. And this is where the so-called integrative hallmarks of aging come in. Put more simply and in more colloquial terms so we can all understand what I'm going to do now, is basically talk to you about two mechanisms that connect all the previous failures and turn them into a global problem. One of them is crucial nutrient sensing, a fundamental biological process. Your body is constantly receiving signals that tell it there's food, there's energy, so it should grow and produce. And that's great, but of course, only for a while. The problem arises when that message never stops. And why does it happen? It's quite simple. Your body fundamentally has only two primary modes. It can either grow and repair, and it absolutely cannot do both at precisely the same time. So if you put it in growth mode, you never enter repair mode. See how simple it is. And that's one of the big warning signs when it comes to nutrition and longevity. But nutrition isn't alone. There's another major integrator of failures. The communication between our cells. When there's damage, when there's excess energy and cells that aren't functioning properly, the cells get confused. Some are constantly asking for help, while others simply interpret danger where there is none. In other words, what happens is that your immune system starts receiving conflicting messages. Then something happens that might seem absurd. I've told you about it in another previous video. Your own defense system starts to act inside your body as if there were a constant threat, even though in reality there isn't any. Real enemy. To help you understand better, imagine 3 radios turned on and working at the same time. The first radio is the famous senescent cells, in other words the squatters, those we call zombie cells. These are cells that no longer work properly, but nevertheless they don't go away and spend all day sending out alarm signals. In other words, constant noise. The second radio is the mitochondria that are damaged. When they don't work well, they produce less energy and obviously more waste. This is like a car engine. The body interprets that waste as a danger. So, once again, another alarm. And the third radio is visceral fat, the kind that accumulates around the organs as we age. And the problem is that this fat that builds up in that area isn't just a reserve. You might think this is typical of primitive humans who stored up reserves. No, this is an active tissue that can easily send out inflammatory signals. So those are the three different radios, the three small noises, but together they build a constant noise that creates that silent fire. It doesn't need a big flame, just a lot of embers burning at the same time is enough. And now let me tell you a true story. In the 1980s, and then continuing for several decades, the epidemiologist David Snowdon from the University of Kentucky, he studied hundreds of elderly nuns in the United States. They were nuns from the School Sisters of Notre Dame congregation. All of them lived in a very similar way, with stable routines, drank little alcohol, had little chaos around them, regular schedules, and when many of them died over the years, they had donated their bodies to science, and researchers were able to study their brains. Well, it turns out they actually found something quite surprising. In some of the brains of these elderly nuns, they surprisingly found typical Alzheimer's disease lesions, which was quite unexpected. And to get into specifics, I mean beta amyloid plaques or neurofibrillary tangles. If you understand about Alzheimer's disease, you'll know these are quite common, and that these types of damage are frequently accompanied by very severe dementia. However, the nuns did not develop it. They conversed fluently, remembered the names of the people who visited them, read, taught others, and they showed no signs, none at all, of clinical dementia. However, the books say they should have had it, but they didn't. Thanks to the generosity of this community of nuns and the tenacity of David Snowdon, what was achieved was to break a widely held belief that brain damage is equivalent to inevitable dementia. Well, it turns out that's not the case. And this is something that should truly make you and me deeply reflect seriously. It should make us think about everything we can do to enjoy a long and healthy life, instead of focusing only on the difficulties. In other words, there are solutions, and even though they may often seem surprising to you, they do exist. Why didn't the nuns develop dementia? Because their bodies hadn't spent decades living in a constant state of emergency. Their internal and external environments were calm. They lived with few false alarms. And there was very little smoke coming from their kitchens. And of course, you might ask yourself, but is this possible for us who aren't nuns? Well, yes, of course it's possible. The secret is always to keep in your mind that what is your specific biological context? And that's it, exactly. That's what the scientists concluded when they finished the study on the community of nuns. A human brain can indeed tolerate significantly more damage and recover more effectively when the entire body is not inflamed, when sleep patterns are consistently regular and restorative, when energy levels are meticulously well managed and sustained, and crucially, when the immune system is not on a constant heightened state of alert, but rather functioning optimally and calmly. The broader scientific community calls this phenomenon cognitive reserve, which is also known as neuroinflammation or simply the metabolic environment. I call it something else. order, peace, and balance in your everyday life. So now you know, keep this information. But before that, I'm going to give you a case. It's much closer to me and happened to me recently. A man, a 55-year-old friend, doesn't smoke, hardly drinks alcohol, works regularly, has a family, and isn't sick. But for some time now, he's been constantly tired. After eating, he falls asleep and tells me that he's even started to have trouble, even concentrating. His sleep has gone from being deep to very light. He wakes up at the slightest thing. And the lab tests, what they tell him is that everything is more or less fine. He's 55 years old, but he's fine. And the man calls me to ask because he knows I study in depth what happens to us, what happens to me, and what happens to the people around me. And what did I tell him? Well, I told him that he's being caught in a trap, and that little by little that trap is closing in on him from all sides. Look, it seems obvious that he's not sick, but it also seems obvious that smoke keeps coming out of his body's kitchen, rising up to his brain. He has less and less muscle mass. He doesn't do any exercise, and therefore obviously he has fewer and fewer mitochondria. And it's likely that as a consequence of that, since he keeps eating in a fairly normal way, he has more and more junk piling up in the hallways. When I say eating in a normal way, I mean that he keeps living the same way he did when he was 40, and now he's 55. In other words, he's not listening to his body, and he's more than likely, for years now, he's been in a state of low-level emergency, no screaming, no pain, but also no rest. Anyway, just think about it. At least he does. What he told me is that it seems like he's finally getting serious about rebuilding muscle. He told me he joined a gym and is actually going, and he started eating, with more respect for his own body. And he also told me that he was going to start intermittent fasting. I'm just using him as an example, that's all. Chronic inflammation usually doesn't kill you suddenly. What it does is take away something much more valuable. It takes away your margin. And what is margin in the context of what we're talking about now? Well, it's very simple. Margin is what allows you to recover, adapt, and absorb those mistakes that we all make. The less margin you have, the more likely you are to run into problems. Think about it like this, right? If the silent fire lives inside you, the first thing you lose is margin. Then you lose freedom. And in the end, what you lose is your health. And here's something important, which I've already mentioned to you several times. All of this that I'm telling you about happens without you feeling pain, without a fever, and without any clear alarm going off. That's why it's so dangerous, because it lets you live normally, while inside it's slowly wearing you down. It's complicated. Yes, I understand completely. But the truly wonderful news, the truly encouraging news, is that the human body is far from fragile. Instead, it possesses an extraordinary capacity to adapt and transform in truly remarkable and astonishing ways, phenomena that continue to profoundly impress and captivate even the most seasoned and brilliant scientists in the field to this very day. And it has mechanisms to cleanse, to rebuild, and to repair. But for that to truly happen above all else, you absolutely have to fully understand the fundamental problem at hand. So far we've talked about the smoke, about that strange smell that appears when something isn't right, but we still don't see the flames. Surely today, after listening to this video, you can already understand something fundamental, and that is that chronic inflammation, as I mentioned, is not a specific disease, it's a state. It's living for too long in a constant mode of low-level emergency. It's something that doesn't hurt enough to scare you. In other words, you don't feel bad enough. Like stopping, going to the hospital, talking to the doctor, but inside, the heat just keeps rising. Let me share with you a really uncomfortable truth. that I need to tell you quite clearly. The silent, insidious fire can persist for many, many years. It doesn't just simply hang idly in the air, but rather it lingers and endures. The pervasive smoke invariably permeates the very fabric of the walls, perpetually leaving an indelible mark and ultimately causing significant structural damage. What today was just a vague sensation. Tomorrow, it will start to become something you notice when you get up, when you climb stairs, when you try to remember a name, or when you feel your body no longer responds the way it used to. But let me continue. We have to be realistic. Yes, no doubt about it. Realism is the foundation of knowledge, but we don't have to get pessimistic either. Not everything is worrying news. As I was telling you a moment ago, scientists and researchers continue to be amazed by the human body. It is a true marvel of creation. And now I'm going to give you some information about the results of a recent study that, however, has changed completely how we understand everything I'm telling you about. For many years, we believed that when the body attacked itself, what I've been telling you about in these recent videos, the immune system simply started to fail, that it went crazy, firing at anything that moved. Today we know that's not entirely true. In many cases, and pay attention to this, the problem isn't that there aren't enough soldiers. The issue is, pay attention, that there aren't enough breaks. Breaks? Surprising, right? But no, it's not. Just think about it. When a defense system loses its brakes, self-destruction isn't an accident. It becomes the consequence. If you lose your brakes on the road, boom, crash. Well, I'll talk to you about this in an upcoming video because it's really interesting and has completely changed the way we understand it. And in the next video, we'll stop talking about the smoke, and what we're going to do is open the doors. We're going to go into the rooms of the house, of your house, the one I've been referring to as your body, and see what has happened after decades of a silent fire. And this isn't to scare you, but so you understand, because only when you have the courage to look the damage in the face, only then you can start to think about rebuilding and how to rebuild. We have walked together through the battlefield of our longevity and today's lesson. To me, it seems fundamental. The great enemy is not age, is that silent fire that doesn't hurt, but it burns. We have addressed 4 things in relation to this silent fire. First, we talked about inflamma, that is inflammation, the state of mild but constant emergency through which we do not allow our immune system to shut down. Second, the significant internal fire, primarily caused by 3 distinct alarms, that of senescent zombie cells or cellular squatters, that of severely damaged mitochondria, and that of problematic excess visceral fat. Third, the most valuable and crucial result you lose is your vital margin, that is, your body's essential capacity and inherent ability to recover from various demands and to effectively absorb and adapt to unexpected errors and setbacks. And fourth, you must be aware that understanding silent fire is the first step to stop living without a safety net. This is very, very important because when you lose margin, you simply live with greater fragility. I'm sure you understand. It's very simple. And any small event that you would have previously absorbed without any problem can now end up triggering a much bigger issue. How many times have we seen a friend who, over something trivial, ends up dead 2 days later? They lacked margin, they ran out of margin. In short, understanding the importance of chronic inflammation will allow you to take conscious actions, such as For example, regenerating muscle, maintaining proper nutrition, or something as simple as practicing intermittent fasting to help you turn off that gentle alarm and get rid of some of those zombies wandering around inside. By turning off the alarms, those firefighters who had settled in your house for good and are always ready to jump into action will finally be able to rest and might even leave. Your body will stop using up its savings, its margin, and you'll be able to start regenerating it. You'll regain robustness and leave fragility behind. And it doesn't matter how old you are, it's very possible. Trust in that. That's all for today. We'll continue in the next video. And as I always say, keep moving forward, always forward. And I'll read your comments.